so empty. I've made my way through caves and this place feels the same to me. Why can't I hold on to the visions that you left behind? Why can't I take on and see you on the other side? It's been a long ride and I'm thinking of you all the time, but I've got a feeling that I'll find you where we last said goodbye. It's been a long time since we held our hands to the sky, keeping the dream alive. I'll go and search for you tonight. And I'll give it my all till I find you, and give you my all when you're here. When we finally realize that we've been learning to fly, we'll have already reached the edge of the atmosphere. It's been a long ride and I'm thinking of you all the time, but I've got a feeling that I'll find you where we last said goodbye. It's been a long time since we held our hands to the sky, keeping the dream alive. I'll go and search for you tonight. And I'll give it my all till I find you, give you my all when you're here. I'll give it my all till I find you, then give you my all when you're here.
Do you remember me? I'm the girl whose heart you stole. I don't want it back, please. You can keep it. My mind's made up on who I want holding it. You're a little too close, or too far away. It's much too early, or it's far too late. Maybe I'm too old now, or just afraid that you'll walk away. I'm too old now. I'm just afraid that you'll walk away. You're across the road from me, but it's an ocean wide, and the current's pulling us, dragging me aside. Or you're a constellation, and I'm just a star, blinking in the universe, but you'll never notice me at all.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the third episode of Coach's Corner, where we learn how to stun our opponents on solo queue, brought to you by Summoner School Events. Here with me today I have Superman, and he's here to show you how to carry as a support. But before we do that, I want to touch on a new exciting fact that we are now partnered with Summoner School Events, which you can head over to cc-lol.com. We have a little blurb on our website, as well as a link, I believe, as well as the mods in chat will be posting their Twitter, so go ahead and follow them. They do some really cool content, including a program that they call Learning Fives, which is sort of similar to Coach's Corner, except in the other direction. So instead of learning solo queue one-on-one, it's ranked fives, where you and a group of 4 other people will be coached by someone at least 2 leagues above you for a period of a couple weeks, and there will be a lot of improvement, as well as some ranked 5-on-5 action that will be live streamed. So please go ahead and check them out and stay tuned for some more really cool stuff that we'll be doing together. But that being said, let's jump in to the third episode of Coach's Corner. So here, as I said, we have Superman, who is a support legend, god, if you will. Superman, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks for that. My name's Superman, IGN, I'm Superman. I have been solo coaching League of Legends for about 2.5, 3 years now, and I evolved that through shoutcasting, moving on to more coaching, and I eventually became the head coach for an ex-NACS organization, Zenith Esports. Some people may have heard of them. They've done well in the Challenger Series from time to time. I was their head coach. I retired only recently, but I love to teach people how to play League of Legends, so here I am on this show, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, well, if you wanted to get some extremely high-quality content, you're in the right place. So let's go over our keys to the game, shall we?
Sure. Yeah, so as a support, there's 3 keys that I want to go over for this game, especially in particular, and just in general. The first is prepare. Second is position, and third is predict. And throughout this game that we're going to watch the replay for today, we'll see different things that tie into each of those 3 points.
All right, and so let's do something a little bit different this time. Instead of jumping straight into the game, let's talk a little bit about the support role and a little bit about champion select and picking the support that makes sense for your team, as well as just makes sense for you. So why don't you take it away on just support and what goes into that role?
Sure, yeah. So in the support role, you kind of want to think about how, first, what champions you play. You know, not everybody plays every single support champion. It takes a long time to become proficient on every single support champion. Sometimes off-meta picks become meta, all this kind of stuff. So you have to know, first, have a pocket of 3 to 5 champions that you're proficient with, you feel comfortable on going into pretty much any matchup. And then in Champion Select, you want to pay attention to the matchups. You want to say, hey, what does my team need? What does my lane need? What is the enemy team capable of, and how can I play into that? How can I counteract the enemies? So we'll be jumping into the replay here in a second, and you'll see the team comps for the 2 teams in this game. And I ended up picking a champion I felt, 1, comfortable on, but 2, I felt like I could do what my team needed to do. And I'll talk more about that as we get actually into the replay. But that definitely falls into that first category. Like I said, you want to prepare each match, and that's part of Champion Select is part of that, but preparing also throughout the game, preparing by knowing cooldowns, summoner spells, timing things, and communicating properly in chat and setting things up for your team.
So before we hop into the actual replay, I do want to touch on something that's been going on in solo queue and competitive play, and that's the Ignite versus Exhaust sort of topic here. So in case anyone is unfamiliar, recently, I would say recently, although it's become pretty standard now, most of the time supports are now taking Ignite as opposed to Exhaust. So I just wanted to hear from you specifically sort of your thoughts on that, why that has shifted, and if there's still a reason to go Exhaust, and maybe if that has to do with anything about what you see in Champion Select.
Yeah, so it definitely does revolve around Champion Select and falls into that prepare point that I wanted to talk about. The Ignite versus Exhaust is really a judgment call of that support player, and for me what I'm looking at is what the enemy team has. It's not so much my team as it is the enemy team, where I want to know first, do they have high burst champions, assassins, or extremely lockdown potential where somebody might be able to get instantly burst by one champion. For example, an Ari Charm, a Zed, things like that where a lot of damage comes out in a very short period of time. Because the Exhaust, what it does on the defensive end is it's going to reduce outgoing damage from your target that you exhaust on the enemy team by 50% for that short little window there. And it's going to reduce their MR and armor for a bit, but it's more important to think about that reduction of damage coming out. The slows and everything on top of that is nice, but it's more, you want to think about if there's an assassin, you kind of want to try and counter, if you will, with that summoner spell. If there's not really a threat of a lot of burst damage coming out in a very short window, like less than a second or less than a second and a half, then you're going to want to think about taking Ignite. It's a more aggressive spell, and it can definitely help against teams that are prone to those extended trades or have a lot of heals on their team. So you'll see for this match, as Thresh, my 2v2 lane is Thresh and Jinx on my side versus a Tristana and a Nautilus. There's not a lot of burst in that lane outside of maybe an E detonation on top of a post-level 6 ultimate from the Tristana. Otherwise, it's just that DPS, right? And so the Exhaust doesn't do too much because in terms of the crowd control from that spell, I should be able to crowd control with my kit as Thresh, and I shouldn't be relying on a long cooldown summoner spell to do so. So that's why I took Ignite, for a little bit more of that aggression in that lane.
All right. So, talk about aggression, talk about the lane. Let's hop right into the game, shall we?
We might as well.
Alright, so I'm about 4 seconds here. Are you ready to start the game?
Ready to go.
Alright, let's do it. So, we have, as I turn the sounds back on, we are going to be having... Why is my minimap not up? Oh no. How do I turn the minimap back on? Alright, here. So let's go over to our Thresh lane with Superman here. Superman, walk me through runes and masteries.
Yeah, so I've actually posted them in the chat for everybody to click on. There's links for both the runes and the masteries for this match. Now, I don't run too standard of a rune page. I know a lot of people might run just flat AD reds, armor yellows, maybe armor and health, flat MR blues, and maybe move speed or more attack damage crits. I like a little bit of a mix. I like a little bit of attack speed to help with those trades. Definitely a slight little bit of that flat AD you'll see in that page there for helping me last hit with Targons, also the trading potential. And then a mix of those defensive statistics that you'll see in there. Just, it's what I like to run. It's what I've been comfortable with as I've played the game and learned. And so that's, you'll see just if you click on those pages, what I'm running for this particular game on Thresh. But I do want to talk about, before minions even spawn here in this game, you'll see that my champion's standing really still right here, and that's because I'm actually typing. In solo queue, communication trumps everything else. The difference between solo queue and ranked 5v5s is that you don't have as much opportunity to communicate effectively with your teammates in solo queue as you do, say, on Skype or Raid Call or TeamSpeak or something like that with your team in a ranked 5s match. You can learn more about that at Summoner School as well. But in solo queue, you want to communicate as effectively as possible, and a lot of that has to do with the chat or pings. And so right here, I'm giving kind of a pep talk to my team saying, hey, let's peel that Thresh. I'll be Thresh. I'll be peeling for my AD carry because basically they need a Yasuo combo to win this game. We got this, boys. And actually somebody in the chat was like, dang, that pep talk felt great. I feel like we're going to win. And setting that mindset does a lot for solo queue.
All right, so my mini-map is not showing up here because that's fun. I think my replay client is a bit bugged, so I'm actually going to relog. But during that downtime, why don't you just talk a little bit about the matchup, the Jinx versus Tristana matchup and the Nautilus versus Thresh matchup here while I reload the replay here.
Sure. Yeah, so in this matchup, the things to think about is, of course, the Nautilus Q or his slows as they come about. Looking for Tristana E damage. You don't want to take too many autos if you get procced with the bomb above your head, because that can deal a significant amount of trade damage. But in any 2v2 lane, you definitely want to accept and go for trades in which the support, me with somebody with high sustain, a lot of those potions, especially in the level 1, I'll be wanting to take trades. It'll be acceptable and almost desirable for me to take a lot of damage myself if Jinx can deal out a lot of damage to one or both targets. And we'll see that happen as we get into that level 1.
Alright, so I'm finally back into this game after the technical issues. So what time are you at? I will jump to you.
You tell me time, I'll jump.
Alright, let's jump to about 1:30.
1:30, you got it.
Alright, let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
Alright, let's play it up. So, sorry about that, guys. Because Riot is awesome and doesn't have a built-in replay system, we are forced to use third-party tools, which have the downside of not working all the time. So, we will sit here in the bush while we have Superman giving that pep talk that unfortunately we cannot see. But, yeah, now that we're all loaded back into the Rift, let's talk a little bit about those Targon stacks and just a little bit about that item in general.
Yeah, so Targon's is a great item for Thresh. Even though he doesn't get the execute damage for being melee, he still can execute pretty well with the passive E damage you get, which is the spell that you take most of the times at level 1. So, and you always want to use the stack right away, the first one, because that'll make sure that you recharge one for the first cannon wave. These first level 1 trades that you're going to see here, those are really important because I'm taking all the damage. You'll see that Jinx isn't, and that's really good because I've got a lot of potions. And as you're setting up for level 2, remember that's all of the melee minions on top of the second wave, so a full wave plus 3 melees. That'll be the level 2. If we can see that we're hitting it first, which right here is going to be this last melee, I want to position forward because we're a whole minion ahead. So I hit level 2 here. Hooking anybody is fine. I wanted the Tristana, but the Nautilus bottle dog. I ignite immediately, and it looks like, if you look at the cooldown of heal for Tristana, you'll see that it was probably a mistake that she used the jungle. One way or another, she wasn't able to heal there, and we actually pull out the first blood with that ignite tick, going back to taking that summoner spell.
Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about that level 2. I know it's something that's sort of talked about a lot, but for some of the lower level ELO players here, something just to keep in mind is that after you've completed that first wave of minions, after you kill that third melee minion is when you're going to pop that level 2. So, sort of prepping that, you know, if you can tell, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you can tell that you're going to, you know, get that level 2 before your opponent, or if you're going to, if you can tell that your opponents are prepping to get that level 2 on you, positioning becomes extremely important. And as I'm talking, you actually got a crazy hook under tower.
Yeah,
to get Jinx a little bit more fed, but
that definitely falls, like what you were talking about in the preparing category with our 3 key points today. You want to prepare that level 2 so you can get that advantage. If you're going to kill those minions on the enemy minions to hit your level 2 before the enemy 2v2 actually hits their level 2, you have 4 total spells, and you'll see my flash as I was typing to my team there, but you'll have 4 spells to 2 spells, plus the HP, armor per level, health per level, all these types of things that your champions get for that second level makes a huge difference in trading against level 1 champions. So, you saw that hook under tower. I just want to talk about that for a second. Thresh is a really unique champion in the fact that his hook, he's the only hooking champion in the game, like Nautilus or Blitzcrank, etc., who does not have to have his model facing the same direction as his hook is about to be sent from. So I can have my Thresh's face of the champion facing a wall and hook behind me even, without the model having to turn around for a cast time. So it's pretty good for mind games. You can bait a lot of people into making mistakes. And in a little bit of a lull here, I want to talk about the Targons once again. You always want to communicate with your team about how, like, when you want to look for those Targons. And you'll see in this fight, I took the E from the Tristana, but she starts to auto someone else instead. She starts the Jinx. I'm going to look to land all my spells on her as soon as a fight erupts and she makes that fatal mistake. And we got the flash out of it there, as well as her summoner heal. So it's really strong for support players to think about where the damage is coming from the enemy teams and whether or not you think it's a threat to the 2v2.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit too about just like item discrepancy, right? Because you did just get that, you did just get your your AD carry that kill, and I want to just quickly look right here, Armin. You know, longsword to pickaxe. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that, because here's where you get that kill. So that flat AD that you get from a pickaxe, in comparison to the flat AD that you get from a longsword, is just almost not comparable in any state.
Oh yeah,
game
the
ever.
pickaxe is 2.5 longswords. It's a lot more damage coming out, and that's what you would see if you recall there. I just walk past all the minions. If they're not going to jump away or they're going to give space to dodge my Q, I'm just going to walk right at them, try and land a flay into a hook, or vice versa. I'm just going to disrespect the whole fact that they're even thinking about trying to, you know, trade effectively or be aggressive at all. That's why I just walk right through it, try and land a flay or a hook. You just want to be as aggressive as possible when you see that kind of an item differential. It's really important.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something that I think goes kind of overlooked sometimes as well, is just knowing whether or not you're ahead or behind, just knowing you know, how that item discrepancy is going to play out in a trade. You know, something like having a BF sword to boots and a BF sword to upgraded boots maybe isn't the largest deal in the world. I mean, there's still obviously a lot of room for outplay, if you even want to call it an outplay, but something like a pickaxe to a longsword, I mean, that's, especially at like level 2, 3, 4, I mean, you're talking some major advantages for the person with the pickaxe. So
Sure.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, not only was it a good play for you to be aggressive and step up for those hooks, but I mean, probably a little bit of a misplay on the part of the Tristana and Nautilus, just not knowing, or not respecting rather, that sort of power that your Jinx had.
Yeah, and I want to interrupt real quick here. You're going to see me do a recall bait here, and this is because I have 4 of my friends, including myself, in the area, and I'm not expecting a flash ult necessarily from the Annie there, but there's nothing, absolutely nothing that could go wrong for my team there if I just bait the enemy into engaging on me there. I'm pretty decent HP. I know that my AD carry has heal for me just in case something goes terribly wrong, but I know that their duo's terribly behind even if the Shyvana was in the area. We saw her show up top. And look, Annie has Tibbers up too, and I immediately make the call and say, hey, just let the Tibbers tank the dragon and we'll be good to go. We get our first dragon here, but I also want you guys to look at that minimap. I immediately ping on the way to mid lane because I notice, hey, that Yasuo is pushed way up. It doesn't matter if we're walking over wards, we're going to force something here. I don't know why he chooses to do this, where he ults me, but I guess he didn't see the KO or something like that, because he immediately flashes out. We trade ult for ult, but his flash. Yeah.
But yeah, so, I mean, that's just, I think that's also really important, is transitioning kills into objectives, right? You guys knew that your 2v2 was stronger. Not only that, but you had the Goon Squad bot lane, 4 of you guys there. You immediately transitioned that into a dragon, and now here you are mid lane. So talk to me a little bit about why you stuck around mid here.
Yeah, so I actually stayed. I canceled my recall because I realized that Yasuo was kind of being aggressive. And I also had 2 Targon stacks, and with only the level 1 of that Targon's, like I haven't upgraded the item, I definitely want to use those stacks as soon as they're up, and I'll just share that gold with Annie, heal us both back up. And because I didn't feel uncomfortable leaving Jinx on her own down there, I knew she had base, she was coming back to defend a turret, and that was the whole thing. Our lane wasn't pushed up, it was pushing in, so there's relative safety for the Jinx there. But definitely applying some pressure, forcing out a wind wall even, just the little advantages that you can gain for any of your lanes while you're in the area. There's nothing to be said against it, and so that's why I stuck around mid, just for a little bit of extra time there.
Yeah, and those little pockets of aggression, or rather pockets of just presence, can really deter somebody from being aggressive the next time, because they never know if you're there. So even
For sure.
I mean, this is coming from me, who's primarily a jungler, but even just showing your presence in a lane can really just get in the mind of your opponent. So you don't always have to get a hook into a kill, or gank a lane and get something done. Sometimes it's just about the presence of being there.
Yeah, and it's all about the vision game. You definitely want to pay attention to your mini-map, not just champions, but where you last saw champions, where you see minions. If there's a huge wave of your minions pushing in, say in the late game scenario, and there's a double wave, you might be able to play around the vision on the outside of that lane to maybe pick off a priority target that wants all of that juicy farm. And there's a lot of ways to go about playing around vision and paying attention to the small, like you said, pockets of aggression that you can get off in places just to play those mind games with your opponents.
Absolutely. So here we are, we're about 11 minutes in. Your AD carry is 2-0-2, has a decent CS lead, about 20 minions or so. You are also 1-0-3, so in terms of being ahead, I would safely say you guys are pretty ahead here. And quite honestly, it's really stemming from you. Good hooks, good aggression, good positioning. So talk to me a little bit about these keys, right? Preparation, that goes along with warding, that goes along with, just setting up these opportunities. So talk to me a little bit about predicting and warding and what goes into that.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the predicting aspect here. Predicting is a lot more than just predicting movements of enemy champions to land the god tier hook, things like that. You can't land every hook, and they might dodge it, especially as people see it coming more, or you're in vision. People will dodge those hooks or use a spell to dodge it, but you gotta think about what your enemy wants to try to do. I talked in the beginning of this set here about how the enemy team in this match really only has a one-dimensional, what we like to call win condition, which is a Nautilus ultimate or Dragon's Flight Shyvana ultimate into a Yasuo combo trying to burst our damage dealers. The Jinx, maybe the Annie, a Kayle, and that's really the only way that they can start a successful fight, with a Shen being a dive buddy for all of that. Otherwise, they don't really have a lot to get through our front line or even to get to our back line. And here is a great showing of how preparing for things makes a huge difference. I had timed, remember how when I went mid lane, the Yasuo had traded his flash after ulting me? I knew that was still on cooldown, so I used my flash in this scenario to flash Flay, even though he's a semi-mobile champion.
And I really want to hone onto that point as well, because whether or not you're bronze or you're diamond or even challenger, I think something that goes extremely overlooked is timing your opponent's summoner spells or big ultimates or things like that, because knowing your, as I said, like pockets of aggression can literally win you games. Because right there, if you had not timed it, or if you had no idea, he could have flashed, it simply just would have been a flash for flash or whatever, or even you could have gotten flashed on, things like this, right? But you knew that you had flash, you knew that you guys were strong, and you ended up hitting your box and a Flay, I believe, which was all that you really needed to do, and you knew that he had no retaliation. And having that information is just crucial in being able to pick out plays. So if you're a support and you're saying, hey, I can't carry my team, like, they're not good enough or whatever, put it upon yourself to start timing those cooldowns, or start knowing, hey, this person doesn't have ult, they just used it, that's a long cooldown, because that's when you can start making your play, that's when you can start impacting the game as a support, and really any position, but especially support.
Yeah, and it's when it comes to a support that has any sort of initiating spell, like Annie support with any sort of stun, any sort of hooking champion, it's up to you as a support to set up obvious plays. If you're going to hook somebody, it's pretty obvious to your solo queue teammates that don't know you that you want that enemy champion dead, right? If you flash Tibbers as Annie, it's pretty obvious that you want that champion dead. And so for solo queue, it's really important for you to realize what the extent to which you can actually initiate or make plays in any way, shape, or form. Because if you make an obvious play that's bad, you can bait your team into bad things. Versus, you know, the positive aspect, where if you do something smart and it's obvious, then it's not hard for your solo queue teammates to follow up for that.
Absolutely, and I want to talk a little bit too about the other hand, because this game does tend to spiral a little bit. You do keep on hitting great hooks, your team keeps on doing the right things. However, they do end up taking a few towers. They keep the gold relatively close despite the kill disadvantage. But I want to go back about a minute or two when Tristana was caught down here in the brush. I know that she was pretty much ultimately dead no matter what, but I want to just hit on a nuanced point here. Let's just say this game was going a little bit differently. You weren't hitting your hooks as much. You know, it's not that you were playing, let's say you're not playing badly, but you're definitely not, you know, doing what you're doing now, which is completely taking over the game. Talk to me a little bit about still doing things as a support or still using your abilities in ways that you don't have to get that God tier hook, because I saw and I noticed that you let Annie ult her first to stun her and then went for your hook. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, a lot of support players will have kind of this grievance when playing against champions like Tristana, like Caitlyn, that have these part of their kit includes a dash, an escape ability that can be used, say, to dodge or to escape after being hooked. And like you said, you're not always going to land every single hook to set up the play from the very beginning. And so something that you can do to try and set things up otherwise is if you have teammates that have another form of hard crowd control or even just a slow, let them try and land those first so that your hook is easier to land. Or wait, of course, for the enemy to use that escape tool, kind of thinking about the cooldown, you know, it's 12, 13 seconds that I can now have this short little window to try a hook, and if I land it, it's even more devastating. Or with Thresh in particular, you can try, and this can take a lot of practice, but it's a definite skill, is to be able to hook someone and then flay them to interrupt their jumping ability. And it's really just a matter of almost waiting a half second if you're not good enough to look for the animation.
And I think that is an incredibly important point, too. It's just, you know, especially if you feel like, hey, I played this champion 100 times, look for what you could do a little bit better. Look to see how you can push the limits of that champion. Here you just get a pretty nice Hogunner tower, your team's pretty ahead. I want to transition a little bit now, even though this isn't late game, this replay is relatively short because, unfortunately, they're playing against the Thresh God, otherwise known as Superman. Talk to me a little bit about what you want to be thinking about here transitioning in, let's just call it the mid to late game because it is of this game, in terms of zone control and sort of your late game responsibility in team fights as Thresh. And then talk to me about it in sort of two perspectives. The one perspective of, you know, I can start the fight, and the other perspective of what should I be doing when the fight breaks out.
Yeah, so this definitely first ties into that first key point of the day, which is that preparing aspect. You want to set up vision control over the next area of the map. You know, since the change a few seasons back where you can't set infinite wards on the map if you purchase a number, then you have to really care about where on the map you want to secure full vision control. And so you want to prepare. You want to think about, hey, is Dragon up in a minute? Is, like, what kind of towers can we set up for? Where's our pressure on the map? And move that line of scrimmage, if you may. I like to use that term as your vision control. Where is that line that you can step up to absolutely with confidence, knowing that your enemies don't know you're there, or even if they do, they can't come close because they don't know who's with you. You set up that line of scrimmage, keep pushing it forward and up, 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 deeper into the enemy jungle, all the way up towards their base if you must, to secure that area, prepping for your team's next move. But then positioning too. If you're gonna ward all around the dragon pit for the dragon that's coming up in 30 seconds, it's not as wise to then rotate all the way away from your vision up to, say, the top side of the map and waste all that time. So, for example, here, I'm trying to create a line of scrimmage through their red jungle, their red buff jungle, on the red side of the map, so that we can pressure this top turret here with the Darius. I realize that we don't really have everybody here because Jinx is on the bottom side of the map and Annie and Kale decided they're not interested, so we just decided to back up and maybe try and get this Yasuo here. But it's that idea of pushing up that line of vision, pushing up that line of scrimmage with your Sightstone and your Sweeper, so that you can secure an area of your map with pressure in that area, safety in that area, so that pretty much everything you can think of is under your control. You can see everything and prepare for it before it happens. That's part of that prediction too, saying like, okay, I see that Shyvana's coming, I see that the Nautilus is coming, what can I do to prepare for what they're capable of doing to my carries?
Absolutely, and I think that is probably the thing that the lower elo divisions probably do the least, is winning a game with vision, because you'll see that in the LCS, you'll see that in Diamond, you'll see that even in Platinum sometimes, but you know, you can actually just creep your vision up to the point where you could be on their side of the map and almost have it be safer than your side of the map because of how much vision you have, and you can just strangle your opponents out just by keeping that line of scrimmage, just, you know, keeping on moving that line of scrimmage up. And I think that's something that definitely doesn't happen as much in the lower elos, and I think that's probably something that, especially as a support, buying that Sightstone, you can absolutely work on doing for your team. And I've talked about this in other episodes, but being able to see your opponent, being able to be the first one to that situation and know what can come at you, like you said, and seeing that Nautilus, you know, being able to say, well, if I go here, you know, he might hook me because I have that vision, is just is, in my mind, one of the most powerful tools in the entire game. And so, you know, if we look here in about midway point of the map, we don't have too many wards on the map, but if you look on the top side, we got one right here in the tri-bush, and we have one up here. It's just, where can they possibly go to kill this Darius right now, especially because of how much pressure you have on the map? And it's just, it becomes almost like a game of you know, of just pushing that line of scrimmage, like you said, and eventually you just strangle them until you win. So I really want to hone in on that point, because I think that's one of the most important things of this session as well.
Yeah, and talking about that line of scrimmage, I mean, that was a little bit of a sketchy scenario walking past two people, but you can see what I was doing there. With 30 seconds left before the dragon, I'm setting up vision all deep into their blue jungle, so that if they're going to come and contest it, we know, we see them, and they're showing up. We know that where they're coming from, how fast they're going to get there, and what they're doing as they round corners. And then sweeping the vision in the area, setting a pink down in the small brush, and sweeping vision as I see it.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit too, as this game tends to wrap up here, it's just a lot more of you being awesome, so we can sort of touch on other points here a little bit. Warding in lane as well, just keeping those wards prominent. Talk to me, just, I know that's sort of a really basic point, but coming back to lane with at least a ward or two, just tell me how much that impacts that early game.
Yeah, it's really important, not just so that you have vision of the area so you don't get ganked, but also so that you don't lose vision, say, on a side brush in the lane while your team is fighting. You know, there's nothing more frustrating than the enemy being one hit away from dead, and then you forget that you don't have a ward for the brush and they get away because of it. And here you'll see that
sting every day, but yeah.
Yeah, I just want to talk about this fight for a second. You'll see that they almost got everything that they need, but I anticipate everything I can possibly do, shielding people, healing people, and you'll see that if you want to watch that fight again, I want to show how
sure,
this,
let's go for it.
Let's do it. I'm going to go back 15 seconds. It starts at about 22:59, so 23 even. Let me know when you're there, and we'll start it together. But I want to give a precursor before you actually start the replay. So let's start it.
Yeah, let's pause at about 23.
Yeah, 23 even. So with this fight upcoming, I want to talk about first tying back into what can the enemy team do. Now, there is a substantial gold lead here for blue team, the team that my champion is on, and while that's pertinent, there's still a serious threat of the frontline combo with the Yasuo ult on top of the Nautilus ult being comboed with Shen ult to save the Yasuo's squishiness, and Shyvana just wreaking havoc in AoE in Dragon form. Those are all real threats regardless of that gold lead. No lead cannot be thrown, right? There's always that
I mean, this is solo queue
possibility.
after all, let's be honest.
Right, exactly, especially in solo queue. And so you want to think about, okay, as a support, what are my tools to defend against those things? Because without Jinx building a Banshee's Veil, there's no way that she can avoid getting ulted by a Nautilus that's alive there and channeling his ult on her, which will likely be comboed. You'll see in this fight a flash is used by Yasuo to be in range of it, but will likely be followed up by that Yasuo combo. And while he may be 1 in 3, look at his farm. It's the highest in the game by a substantial margin with building a static shiv, so I'm sure he got bonus gold in there somewhere. He's got decent damage, almost completing the Triforce on top of the static shiv. That's a lot of damage, especially he gets that bonus penetration from his ultimate. So there's a serious threat. It's like I said, every team fight can be lost if you played incorrectly. So as Thresh, here's what I'm thinking. I have 2 shields in my kit. One is larger than the other. One is the Lantern, which if I'm kind of setting things up for my team as I have this game, I'm probably not going to be using to reposition people as I am more the shield, because I'll be in the front line. You don't want to grab a Lantern as a carry to move closer to the action if you're already in range to be in it. But the other one, more importantly, is a large shield, relatively, which is that Targon shield. And that's important here because you'll see that I cast it on Jinx because I knew that she would have to get knocked up somewhere, and there's a lot of burst that can come out from the Yasuo. So I'm going to be using that shield. You'll see that the other shield will be used a little bit later to save another person's life, a very close call. But I also want you guys to pay attention to the other spells in my kit. Yasuo is the most mobile of them. And the only thing I can reliably do to him, because I might miss a hook, I might miss the flay, is drop that box if he's either inside it or on top of it. I can also flay if he's slowed, and I know I won't miss because it'll slow him and reposition him a little further away from my carries. But I definitely want you guys to pay attention to the hook, the flay, and that box because they're all important spells and peeling from an 80 carry. So if you're ready, we can go ahead and start this.
Alright, let's play it up. And another thing is just look at the cooldowns on his abilities. He's using every single one of his abilities the best that he can. They're all on cooldown at the end of this fight.
And so Yasuo gets really close here. It's a nice wind wall. He blocks a lot. I dropped down the box because I'm worried about him dashing through everything. He needs to go down. He flashes in to get here. You'll see I flame off again. I put the shield on Jinx to keep her a little bit alive. She gets really close to dying. The E doesn't actually get any auto procs. I hook the Tristana right out of the air. She dies to the ticks from the Darius. My shield here from my Lantern saves the Kayle, and we end up cleaning up the rest of the fight. But there were so many opportunities for things to go wrong in that fight, but it was all up to me to make sure that my priority carries, the Kayle and the Jinx, stay alive. That's on me. There's only so much they can do with positioning. Look at their spells. Kayle ult used. Flash on both of the champions used. Heal used on Jinx. What can she do she did everything possible. And it's up to me as the support to make sure that my teammates can trust me, that they won't be left in the dust to die. And here I force another flash. And that's kind of the name of the game, is playing around the vision like there, and protecting your carries, knowing all the advantages that you can push, and not giving up free things. Paying attention, like I said. Those 3 keys to the game, for sure. I want to tie right back into them as the game comes to a close here. First, prepare. Know the matchups. You don't need to know the intricacies. You don't need to be master tier to know that a Tristana has an escape and that Nautilus has a hook. That you got to play around those 2 spells more than anything else. You don't want to get hooked, and you don't want to, you want to pay attention to if the rocket jump is up, or if you can cancel it with a flay, or hook it, all kinds of things. Pay attention to those spells. 2, positioning for that level 2 early on. Position forward if you're going to hit that level 2 force. Try and play aggressively. Trade with those people. If your 80 carry is not going to take damage, feel free to take the damage upon yourself in a decent trade, because you're going to be able to heal it back up with the 3 to 4 potions you start with that level 1. And keeping that positioning in mind, and positioning around vision. That comes back into the preparing part where you set up vision. and predict what the enemy team can actually pull off, like that fight in the bottom lane.
Hero Shyvana taking Baron as we speak.
Yeah.
But I think what you bring here is just the understanding. I mean, because what you're saying isn't even that complex, right? You're not asking to know the exact cooldowns of a Tristana jump. You're not asking to know, all these little tiny details, but instead the big picture is so much more important in a lot of ways, because we'll talk about this in a second, but in the game here. But I think I have to comment because as a lower elo player, it's really easy to get stuck in that sort of one-dimensional way of thinking. I have my ultimate up, I want to use it, or I have hookup, I want to hook someone. But I think what transitions you from being low elo to high elo, or even just allow you to progress as a player, is starting to think about the next step, or even the next step after that. Because as you said, if you're talking about late game zone control or late game responsibility as support, I mean, how much better of information could you have given right there, going through every single possibility that could go on, sort of anticipating what could happen, especially in the worst case scenario, anticipating that the only way that they're going to win that fight, or the only way that they're going to get a good fight, is to get a Yasuo combo off, and just being ready to shield those people. And all of that being considered, I think, is just sort of that mentality, that mindset is just incredibly important to be able to start improving and start figuring out what you're doing wrong in a game. And I think that, as well as vision control and a lot of the other things that you have mentioned are really, they seem so simple in theory, but just get completely overlooked. I mean, to be understanding, because when you're playing this game, there's about 100 million things to think about. But just knowing, again, it sounds simple, but just knowing, hey, I need to be careful of the hook, I need to be careful of the jump. I mean, these are such simple things, but they end up becoming almost the crux of what can make or break a game. Yeah, it's a matter of play and counterplay, and that's really what League of Legends boils down to in any role. And just like I said, for the support, it's really just those three simple things where it just boils back down to preparing, thinking ahead, setting up vision, knowing the EXP for that early game, and just kind of thinking about the matchup. You don't need to know all the intricacies, you just need to think about how it could go. And then that second key, positioning, making sure that you can put your champion in the right place, put the vision in the right place, move your team, try and, communicate, hey, let's try for a dragon, hey, let's set up vision around Baron, maybe we can get it. Positioning correctly, not just your own champion, but your team and your vision in general. And then, of course, prediction. Predicting for skill shots, predicting enemy skills, At the end, you might have caught that I flash hooked the mid-jump Tristana because that was her only option there, And knowing that's her only option, you try and predict that, you might make a play. Worst case scenario, you waste the flash, but you're not in any position to die if you're playing so aggressively while that far ahead. Absolutely. So as we get back into the discussion lobby, as I'm going to call it, let's just quickly go over the keys to the game one more time, just very briefly. And now would be the time, if you have questions, please feel free to post them in chat. You're not going to get a better chance than this to get your questions asked by any support player. I can guarantee you that. This guy is one of the most knowledgeable guys I've ever had a chance to speak with. So please let the chats flood, and while we wrap up the keys to the game here. Yeah, so it looks like there's already a question. DeBaller93 says, how do you go about when to roam, and when should you be staying with your carry? So that's actually a question we were gonna go over in the main broadcast here, but got sidetracked. Yeah. Very good. So that first question, that's a really great question, and an example I'll give was actually from that replay. There are the times where you want to roam are very much to try and give those small little, we said pockets of aggression, I like to say sometimes incremental advantages for your team, where if you can't really make anything happen bottom lane, say they have a Morgana and your Thresh, like, are you going to hook anybody? No, there's the Black Shield. You have to just play smart until you get Black Shield's on cooldown, or your jungler comes and you just have more damage. If you can't make anything happen, think about what you can make happen. So in scenarios where you don't have opportunities,
where can you create them? So roaming to mid lane in that scenario with rushing mobility boots might work. Buying wards instead of rushing a sight stone, buying mobility boots instead. So that you can roam and still not miss out on too much EXP. But you also have to look more at minions too, not just champions, because if your lane is pushed in the bottom lane all the way to their tower and you don't have a lot of vision control up all the way through the enemy jungle and the river and stuff like that to keep your AD carry super safe, and by super safe I mean still in a 1v2, it's kind of scary, then you don't want to be roaming in a scenario like that, because your AD carry is not really safe. They definitely need you, or they're going to be zoned for forever, and that's not good either. But if your AD carry is pushed into their turret, he or she is farming just under turret, and they're safe, relatively safe, then you can think about dipping back behind the turret into the Fog of War. If you have a pink and Tribush, you can walk through that into Fog of War and thinking about using those mobility boots to set up a play somewhere else on the map. Even if you only make the enemy mid laner or jungler flash or something like that, you've gained that small, like I said, incremental advantage for that lane.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I feel like all these questions can be sort of brought into our main theme of prepare, position, and predict.
Yeah.
But let's see any other questions in chat. Let's go with an underrated support champ for carrying in solo queue.
Underrated support champs carrying in solo queue. A lot of people will say, oh, supports can't carry. I think that they're wrong in the sense that every game is winnable. And while the support role isn't a damage-dealing carry necessarily, sometimes you can play the Zyra, the support mages that might deal a little bit more damage than others, but it's more up to you to win the macro and try and win the strategy, the chess game that is League of Legends, if you may. And so if there's champions that are played from time to time that I would say are underrated and they're better than most people are playing, those are definitely going to be some of those support mages. Like Annie hasn't seen as much play as she used to, but if you're good at a specific champion and you know its limits, it's 8 times out of 10 better to play that champion into any matchup than it is to try and play some sort of OP. And that kind of falls into DeBaller's, like another question in the chat was, what are the 3 or 4 best support champs that can be played in any meta? To answer that is kind of the same answer, is if you're good at Thresh and Blitz and Nautilus, because they're all kind of the hook thing and you're really good at landing those, then there's really no bad matchup to play them into. Because like I said, even if you're playing into a Morgana where your hooks are negated almost, you still have opportunities to use that champion how you know to, right? Roaming comes into play there. And as long as you're comfortable and confident and thinking about the do's and don'ts, then you can't really go wrong as long as you're just sticking with these keys of the game, the prepare, position, and predict with champions that you're comfortable on. But if I were to still, because you're probably looking for an answer like this, guys, if I were to recommend 3 champions that are pretty much good in any team comp, you're going to be looking at the Thresh, the Braum, and probably Janna, even with her recent nerfs. They're pretty good all around, and you just adjust them whether or not you need more engage, more peel, or more disengage.
Awesome. So we're going to take some more questions here, so don't worry.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
If you have a question, please put it in chat. We'll try to get it answered. This is an interesting one. It doesn't necessarily go off of support, but I think it definitely impacts the support. So how can you tell your, I'm going to paraphrase, but how can you tell your silver teammates to upgrade and use their trinkets that they can help you out with vision control?
Yeah, sometimes that's a mind game you play on your own teammates. You're definitely going to have players from time to time that it'll be difficult to convince them to upgrade their trinkets, to go about helping you with vision, because sometimes it is costly, right? You want them to pay 250 gold to upgrade their trinket. That's not a lot, but sometimes people just completed an item, or they're trying to complete an item, and that feels like a lot more gold to them. Versus other times you'll have people who just love to help with vision. The best advice I can give to helping your teammates remember to upgrade their trinkets is right before an objective, when everybody's recalling, or after a fight, just be like, hey, everybody pick up a pink ward because we can secure this next dragon so easy. Like, make it sound like it's duh. Make it sound like it's really easy if they do X, and X is help you secure vision. Sometimes it's hard to convince them to pick up a new trinket or change it, but honestly, sometimes they'll do that in addition to what you ask them for when it comes to just asking them to pick up a pink ward. Everybody's going to have a slot in that mid-game anyway, so just ask them to pick up a pink ward, and they'll probably change their trinket, and they'll see why it's a good idea, because you're trying to secure that objective.
Absolutely, and I know, too, I don't really, that's one thing that I don't get offended by, because, you know, sometimes when people are trying to tell you, hey, build this or build that, you're just like, hey, man, I know I'm playing this champion, I know better than you, but I feel like upgrading your trinket is just something that, I mean, at least for me, I don't get offended when people are like, hey, like, unless they, you know, call you out specifically, but either way, it's like, hey, upgrade your trinket, it helps the team, right? It's not like, build this because you should be building this, it's build this because it helps everybody. So, I think the constant reminders, I feel, are never bad either. Everyone forgets to do it every once in a while, so, yeah.
Yeah, another question in the chat is, I'm Diamond 5 and I'm searching for a mid lane champion that has an escape and is easy to play, and you've rarely played mid before. I've got a suggestion for you. Ahri's a fun champion to pick up. She has pretty much what you're looking for, an escape. Even pre-6, her Q gives her movement speed, so it's a pretty good repositioning tool. And she's fun to play. She's easy to pick up with the skill shots as long as you just farm correctly. So that's one to try. And another question is, what is the best thing you can do to help your lane out when you're far behind? Far behind is relative. I think that every game is winnable and every comeback is possible.
It's solo queue. I always say it's never GG until
when it comes back to being behind, yeah, for sure in solo queue. But in solo queue, you want to be thinking about these 3 keys, you know, the prepare, position, predict, and that's thinking about, okay, well, what can we do? You know, say if Jinx and I were behind in that game and the Tristana was fed, I can still look for opportunities to let them push in. Tristana, like thinking about the matchup, Tristana's E means she has to push in, right? Because it's going to explode minions. They're going to die faster than ours if we're last hitting only, and they're going to push into our turret. That means I'm going to try and put a pink ward in our tri-brush for to encourage a jungler to come for us. I'm going to be happy that they're pushing into a turret, because what if I can hook somebody into a turret? That's free damage. Even if we're missing items for damage, that the turret can deal a lot to kind of catch up that damage differential. So there's always things you can think of to do while behind. And it normally has to do with vision and playing to your strengths, avoiding your weaknesses, for sure.
All right, so let's take
another question is,
2 more questions here.
Do you ever intentionally pick off-meta supports? Okay, so do you ever intentionally pick off-meta supports / kill lanes? From time to time, I will pick off-meta supports, not necessarily for a pick lane, but more because it's necessary, in my mind, for a team composition. For example, I might pick the Zyra support even though she's really high risk, high reward. Against a team that's high dive, you know, like they have an Elise, they have a Yasuo, like all these champions that want to dive to the backline. I might pick Zyra into something like that because she has so much disengage, or the Janna, you know, something like that. The off-meta picks will definitely come from me thinking that my team's missing something or needs something to come back from behind or secure a victory. But good question.
All right, let's go with the last question since it relates back to the stream. What is a good Thresh build in the current meta? And I also want to hear your opinion on Zeke's Herald.
Yeah, so what is a good Thresh build in the current meta? Well, right now, pretty much every support will build the first 2 items the same. They'll have their support item, which won't be the same, and mobility boots 9 times out of 10. And the reasons for those 2 things are, 1, support items give gold generation and decent stats that a support wants. Mana regen, health regen, or some sort of healing aspect. CDR, all these great things that a support definitely wants to be able to do what a support does. And then the mobility boots and a sight stone. Those are like, that's your core, is parts of a full support item, a sight stone, and your mobility boots. That's going to be your core right there, and that's for warding, vision control, roaming if necessary, or to get ahead, even further ahead, and to have those all-around stats you want. So those are going to be your core. And now for Thresh in particular, you definitely want health items, because you're naturally going to be on the front end of things and taking damage in fights by the nature of your champion and where you're going to be in the fights. You're going to be hooking somebody, flaying somebody. You know, you're going to be close. So you're going to be taking damage. So health is really good. Hence, Targon's is a great choice of support items to go with. And as you're building health items, you want to think about what kind of damage you're taking. If they're all AD, of course, you're going to be looking for maybe even the Zeke's Rush, but I'll get into that in a second. But something that has armor and health, because you're taking primarily physical damage. And with the Aegis Rush, that's a little bit more than I want to get into. Aegis is much more niche now than it used to be because of the nerfs to it recently, but that's something to consider when you're against a high AP team. You know, you're taking a lot of magic damage. But typically your core will look something like this. A fully completed, like your 6-item late game build, it will look something like this. You'll have a fully completed support item, a sight stone, mobility boots with some sort of an enchantment that plays into how the game is going. You'll have a peel spell, and sometimes that can be switching out for coin for the Targons if you don't need the health and you're just trying to run away, or Emma Kale's, other things like that. There's peeling items. Randuin's even falls into that category with the slow. You're going to have some sort of engage or aggressive item like a Righteous Glory, or I'm blanking, but Righteous Glory is a great item for that kind of stuff. Oh, an aggressive item. Like, yeah, Talisman, it can fall into that category. Or, as you mentioned, the Zeke's Herald. And your 6th item will be situational, probably for more defense, just for your own specific champion. But let's talk about that Zeke's Herald. If you have more questions about the build, you can tweet me. But the Zeke's Herald is really, really strong right now, even without the bug that gave it 250 bonus HP or mana or something like that. I don't know. It was dumb.
Dumb.
But it's a really strong item if you can benefit from it and you're ahead. While behind, it's hard because you have to play around it. But if you're ahead, you don't really need to play around it. And if it's up, the passive of it, I mean, or the active passive, if you may, the proccing, crit chance and AP bonuses. If it's up, those are real good buffs to your team. But typically, rushing it is going to not make as much sense unless you're really snowballing hard and you're on a champion that definitely makes use of the core stats of the item without the passive. For example, Janna definitely gets a lot of bonuses from mana, CDR, AP, and then, of course, the bonus AP. There's almost nothing wrong with rushing that item on a Janna because she gets use out of all the base stats, and the active just makes her out of this world, and, of course, makes your AD carry very scary, or whoever you choose to bind to. Thresh, for example, though, you probably only want to build that when you have a hyper attack speed carry. So, like, Jinx is a good example, but if you're so ahead, you can probably... Well, like the last game, for example, the VOD we watched, I didn't build Zeke's because there were other things I needed that were more important. At the end there, I finished with some cloth armor in my inventory I probably could have built into a Zeke's, but it was more important to secure vision to snowball that lead above and beyond needing extra damage because she already had the item leads that we talked about. Zeke's is a really strong item, though. It's just more of a snowball item, and it's only really good to build if you're even or behind, if your champion really makes good use of all of the base stats. But that's a really good question.
All right, guys. There were a few questions in chat that I feel like we have answered at the beginning of the show. So if you missed the beginning of the show or you just want to go rewatch that, the VOD will be up after this broadcast as well as directly put up onto YouTube. And if you'd like to find our YouTube channel, go over to cc-lol.com, and it's pretty self-explanatory. The YouTube button will probably come up and hit you in the face. I want to just give a brief shout out again to our partnership with Summoner School Events. Be on the lookout for cool and big things to come with that. Also check out their Learning Fives program. So if you need any more questions answered, or if you want a very specific question answered, feel free to tweet Superman. He has posted it in chat. I want to apologize for the technical difficulties this show. There were a few. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching Coach's Corner. The next show will be on Sunday. Please follow, like, subscribe, whatever. I never know all the things, but thanks again for watching. Thanks again, Superman, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And have a great rest of your night. And just remember, Coach's Corner, where we learn how to stun our opponents on solo queue.
I'm surrounded, but the echo feels so empty. I've made my way through caves, and this place feels the same to me. Why can't I hold on to the visions that you left behind? Why can't I take off and see you on the other side? It's been a long ride and I'm thinking of you all the time, but I've got a feeling that I'll find you where we last said goodbye. It's been a long time since we held our hands to the sky, keeping the dream alive. I'll go and search for you tonight. Ooh. And I'll give it my all till I find you, and give you my all when you're here.